Right, we're off. Wicked. So, welcome everybody once again to Lost in the Lockdown. Today we are going to be discussing White Rabbit and House of the Rising Sun, episode 5 and 6 of Lost first season. So before I get into talking like I normally do, Scott, have you got some stats for us?
I have done the homework. Episode 5, White Rabbit. It aired on October 20th, 2004. It had 16.82 million viewers when it aired. So they're still kind of getting those quite high figures. Directed by a gent called Kevin Hooks, who is most famous for directing Passenger 57 in the 90s.
Oh, right.
So in this episode in particular, they obviously didn't go for in-house directors that they had, with Jack Bender and writers, like Lindelof and Abrams himself. Mm-hmm. It was written by Christian Taylor, who has done a lot of work on very, very famous shows such as The Clone Wars and 6 Feet Under. So quite a far removed from Clone Wars.
Definitely.
Yeah. So it was particularly well acclaimed by critics. It's particularly noted for its first in-depth look into Jack as a character, which we'll be going into, obviously. Mm-hmm. And also, as an added bonus to my introduction, famous birthdays. So we have John Krasinski, Snoop Dogg as well, Tom Petty, who's no longer with us, unfortunately, Viggo, as Mortensen, not from Ghostbusters 2, and and my dad as well. So quite a lot of famous birthdays on that one. I've got some for the next episode. They're not as well. There's a couple, but there's one not so riveting.
Well, I'll just say what everyone's thinking, and even though it's not today, but happy birthday, John Krasinski.
I think he would turn 40, I think, this year or last year. He's a big boy.
Cool guy.
I think Snoop Dogg's probably about 60 now.
He's a granddad, isn't he, Snoop Dogg? Whilst we're digressing.
It wouldn't surprise me. He's probably dipped his toes into many a different paddling pool. So,
to put it politely.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm going to have a look now. But thank you, Scott, for the stats there. So we'll jump straight into it. So as you've already stated, this is the first Jack-centric episode. I guess where I'd begin is really, I think it really starts with the flashbacks, and it's the young Jack, if I remember rightly.
Yeah.
And he's getting bullied, by some. His mate's getting bullied, isn't he? And then he gets beaten up as a result of it.
That's right.
Yeah, and then he goes to see his dad, Christian Shepherd, who we've already discussed. Quality name. And he kind of gives him that pep talk about basically he's not got what it takes to be a hero, which we know from what we've seen so far is completely not the case. But it kind of instills that doubt that Jack's got.
Yeah, it was kind of like that classic superhero origin almost, where someone from their youth, like whether it's a parent or a peer or someone who's like a bit, they might be at odds with you, and they'll throw the that classic sort of tropey line, "You won't amount to anything," you might think you're something big but you're not, but it was done in quite a bit of a different way, where it's like the father directly saying to the child, "Nah, you're nothing, mate. I'm the only success in this family," basically, which was nice. But it wasn't as explicit as that. But you got that very sort of hostile kind of vibe from Christian.
Yeah, I think as well it jumps out. These flashbacks, they're very erratic, obviously because it's the first introduction, and we know as the series goes on that they do drop a lot more events within the timelines of each character.
Yeah.
But obviously you've got a young Jack at the start, and then this is very much a fast forward to Christian has abruptly left for Australia, and that's when his mum's asking him to bring him back. And obviously we know that his dad doesn't come back alive, but it's quite telling, I think, from that line that he doesn't have what it takes. It obviously sticks with him. I don't know if anyone else would agree with that.
Oh yeah, I mean, 100%.
Don't interject.
Yeah. Oh, no, I agree completely because it's very interesting. I remember back whenever Lost was first airing. Do any of you remember the website Television Without Pity?
I'm not familiar with it.
No, I can remember.
No, it's just they used to do recaps of every episode, and it was back in when Lost was airing, 2004, and I just always remember them referring to the island as a whole as like Daddy Issues Island, and there's a lot of characters that really applies to. Yeah, Jack especially, in his first spotlight episode. But when you think, like, you go through all the different characters, you're like, okay, well,
yeah.
Not to give anything away, but like I can think of maybe 5 off the top of my head, including the next episode we're going to talk about. So you have like Kate, Sawyer, Locke, Jack, who else? Jin,
Hugo.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. Cheech.
Yeah. Cheech Marin,
yeah. But yeah, as you say, I think superhero origin is a really good way of putting it, because I mean Jack is our de facto lead character, I guess. So I guess those are the qualities you want to have in your lead character, and it's a very, again, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but it is a very succinct and economic way of getting that across. And the backstory only gets filled in more and more with each Jack episode, and you're just like, it really endears you to Jack right off. I mean, yeah. we already had that in the pilot where he's immediately the man of action, but yeah, the flashbacks just, yeah. I mean, he
does have that superhero quality to him, I do think. I think it is a very good analogy in a way. He does have that quality. In the pilot, all he needs is a cape, really, doesn't he? To be running across the beach, saving all the people. That's how I look at it.
He pretty much is doing that. He's like, like Superman going to save people in peril in like a disaster. It pretty much is spot on. It's almost right on the nose. Like you say, all he needs is the cape. But I think it's quite telling how, as a character, Jack was somewhat mentally, well, I'm not going to say abused, but he was definitely
broken down.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's it. I'll try and find a lesser way of describing it.
I know what you mean.
But he was affected by his dad, but funnily enough, he still pursued the same career, which is even more telling, I think.
Yeah,
he kind of wanted to prove himself to his dad.
Yeah. I think it's that age-old thing, isn't it, where he harbours a lot of guilt for whatever reason. Well, as the series goes on, we get to know more of these things. But I think even though his dad does mentally torment him, I guess, throughout his life, it's all to kind of, in his own weird way, harden him to the facts of life, I guess. But like you say, he does, in the end, ironically, pursue exactly the same thing as his dad, just because he wants to. It's that age-old thing. He basically wants him to love him. Yeah. That's it. He just wants to be good in the eyes of his dad, and that is, again, I think, quite a familiar trope in a lot of TV series.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think I lost my train of thought. Sorry, ignore that. I was just reading a note.
That's all right.
Sorry.
I think it sort of works against Jack sometimes, because everybody sees him as this sort of leader, and I think in this episode especially, again, it's he's a bit delirious and he's saying things, but he really doesn't want that role thrust upon him, and even though that's the kind of thing he's been working towards to maybe spite his dad, but when it comes to life on the island, it's like, no, just leave me alone. I don't want this.
Yeah, I don't know if you agree, but do you think in a weird way that when he's on the island, he's kind of got to become something like his dad, like in that position of power almost, because Christian's like, well, he's the head surgeon, isn't he, in his field, and he's got that authority to him. And almost in a very
Mhm.
ironic way, when Jack does get to the island and he does show his skills as a surgeon and as a leader, whether he means to or not, he does in a weird way have to come into the shadow of his dad, even though no one else knows who. Well, at this time that we know, people know Christian. He does thrust himself into that role, whether he means to or not. I do think he's very much like his dad, and he just doesn't realize it at this time, anyway.
Yeah, I think a lot
Yeah.
of sons and daughters will have a similar thing will happen to them in their life where they'll try so hard to not be like their parent, and then they'll just unconsciously they'll be exactly like, or they act exactly like them.
Mm. Yeah.
Definitely.
I try so hard not to be like my dad because we're completely different, but I end up saying things like he would say them or reacting like he would react, and it's terrifying.
Yep. Yeah. Sorry, just as a personal example, this has nothing to do with Lost, but it's like anytime I remember my dad being angry, he always makes like this face, and it's not necessarily an angry face. It's just more of an emotionless, but I'm staring straight at you, and you know you've done something wrong face, and I know that I make that exact same face whenever my son does something.
Because the look in his face is exactly the same as yours when you was his age, probably.
100%.
And then in that moment, do you go, "Oh my god"?
Oh yeah,
I am my dad.
It's awful. Exactly.
Sins of the father.
Love it. Exactly. and I mean that, like, it's like you say, Daddy Issues Island. It is it as the series goes on, it's very clear that is one of the main through lines, I guess, for all the characters.
Without a doubt, yeah.
And obviously we'll get into
Even-
it, but there's someone else that's involved with Christian as well. Well, there's a few, but specifically one character.
Oh, of course, yeah. Oh, yeah. Fuck.
Sorry to remind you so early on, but yeah, sorry. I didn't say any name, but yeah. So there's a lot going on with Christian that at this time we just assume he's a bit of a mess and a bad dad. And obviously you get the revelation that he's a bit of an alcoholic as well in this one.
Yeah, like 2 empty bottles of whiskey in his drawer or something. It's like, kid, this guy just went for it.
Oh yeah, is that when Jack's at the hotel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the guy said, "Oh, look, there's no way he's going to rent a car in this condition." I was like, "Of course, look at that fucking empty bottle. No way that guy's driving."
I always liked it that Jack was like, "What are you trying to imply? My father is the head of surgery or whatever." And it's like, still don't mean he can't drink 2 bottles of whiskey, Jack.
If anything, he can do what he wants, really.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, well, I'm just reminding myself of it on my notes as well. But he's very much stubborn like Christian as well, because he doesn't want to go to Australia to find him. He thinks his dad's a lost cause, I think. But it obviously takes a lot of pushing, but he does end up going. And it's all part of that overall plan to get him onto the island. But I just think that... Where was I? Oh, yeah, sorry. I think the bit where he identifies Christian's body in the morgue's quite... it's Matthew Fox selling it completely. And I think it's that is the amalgamation of everything we've kind of just touched upon, is that, he doesn't want to be like his dad. He kind of hates his dad, but he respects him and he loves him a lot, and it all kind of hits him in the face when he sees his body.
I think he has a lot of... he obviously owes him a lot. Like, there's the big debt of gratitude, because his dad would... I mean, without seeing much in terms of context, but you could just presume from what we've seen already that his dad was instrumental in him becoming a doctor. So, I mean, that's just easy to see just by the fact they are in a similar field, and also the fact that his mum was pleading for him to go to Australia. And it did take him a few seconds for him to actually accept it and say, yeah, okay, I'll go. But he's, if he really didn't want to go, he wouldn't have gone. So I think that says it all, really.
Yeah. There's a lot of we don't find out in this episode, but I sort of remember bits and pieces of what happens. And Tom, you've watched ahead, so you can probably confirm this. But there's a huge element of guilt to why Jack goes.
Yes.
And yeah, isn't that right? Yeah, I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, more or less, there is an aspect of that, definitely.
I just thought it was quite nice, because the opening to this episode is where Jack tries to save the woman from Journey, and he
Correct.
ends up
I was going to get to that. Yeah.
saving Boone instead. So I mean, Jack's whole thing is guilt. There's a lot of characters whose guilt drives what they do, but I think Jack's is probably, his guilt drives him the most, I would say. And this episode is very good at that. And obviously he's seeing the visions of his dad. It's a bit on the nose. It's not exactly subtle, but I think it works really well. Again, I've got to stop saying this works really well, but it really does.
No, but I think you're absolutely correct. When you really do start talking about it, you do realize how all these things are just put to us anyway. I know we're fans of the show and everything, but when you do actually think of it from a very logical point of view, they are all expertly written plot points that just work so well together. I mean, another, to further the superhero analogy, whilst you've mentioned it, we'll move on to the island events. So obviously it opens with, like you say, they fail to save the drowning woman. He does save someone.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's obviously a horrible set of events that poor lass ends up losing her life, but to Jack, it's not enough. Clearly, it's not enough that he's just saved Boone.
It's never enough if you just save Boone.
Well, we'll get to that as we go along, but you know what I mean? It's just, and he feels like, he feels that he has to be able to do it. It's almost like it's written into his DNA that he has to be able to do it. So what Christian was telling him when he was younger, you don't have what it takes. Well, that's him, flipping the bird at his dad to say, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And when he can't do it, he can't take it. He can't stand it. Because in a way, he knows his dad was right.
Yeah, and then obviously Boone was kind of like scratching that itch. He was pushing him after the fact, and then that's when he lashed out. Well, he kind of lashed out at Boone and said, well, you didn't do anything to save the girl, did you? And you're a lifeguard. You didn't do fuck all. You didn't.
Yeah.
You're useless.
Why are you here?
Yeah, basically. Which is quite. It has good timing in that because then he obviously sees Christian. And then his little foray into the woods happens, which I did enjoy this episode. It's probably one of my favorite parts of the first season. Is when we'll go into obviously, but when John goes to find him, I quite like the lead up to that and the actual conversation I have.
Well, let's get into it whilst we're thinking about it. So, go ahead, really.
Okay. Oh yeah. So I was about to say Matthew. Jack sees a vision of Christian, who we know at this point we don't know is dead. Do we know he's dead at this point?
Probably not. I think it's later on in the episode with the second or third flashback, I want to say.
Well, he sees Christian again. He follows him, and he catches up to to Christian, and he follows him and ends up falling down a cliff and hanging off the edge of another cliff. So he rolls down a hill. Sorry, this big action sequence. Rolls down a cliff, and then he falls off the edge of a cliff and grabs onto the edge. And conveniently, John has found a way to reach Jack, even though he has no idea where he is. John has gone to find water because someone on the beach has somehow taken the water which they needed for Claire. So John, who seems quite apathetic about it, says it's okay, we'll be fine, because John's very zen at the moment. Everything's great for him. He goes off to find the water and he finds Jack pretty conveniently, pulls him up, and Jack actually tells him about the vision he had, which he doesn't give any detail as such, but he tells about the vision that he has. And John kind of plays this kind of psychological game with him and says, well, are you crazy, or was it a real ghost? And Jack says, well, I'm a doctor, so I'd say it's a hallucination. But John kind of goes, well, I know this island is special, so he kind of throws it back at him to trying to make him think about it a bit more in terms of what's been going on the island. Is it in your head, or is it the fact that this island's special?
Yeah.
So John is kind of playing his mental mind games with him almost.
Is that the scene where? Correct me if I'm wrong. They're kind of having the chat, and he's John's kind of inferring about Jack being the leader, but Jack kind of reiterates what Christian said all those years ago to him, where he's saying he doesn't have what it takes.
Yeah, that's right. So he tells John that he doesn't believe he's a leader, but Jack said he doesn't believe he's a leader, but John reiterates the fact that other people see him as one. So
That's it, yeah.
he's trying to reinforce that onto him, that his actions obviously speaking louder than words. And then there's this really great line that John says when they depart. I think he says something like, "Oh, a leader can't lead till he knows where he's going," which I thought was quite a powerful line.
Yeah, definitely. And also as well, just thinking about that, that's a bit of a. I know it's not a Locke-centric episode, but it's also nice to see that beginning of his and Jack's locking horns, I guess, with one another. It's very subtle at the moment because obviously you don't know much about Locke. Well, obviously the previous episode, excluding the characters themselves, don't really know much about it. But you've got that idea now that he's a very spiritual being, and lots has happened to him in this time. So it's interesting to see where he's going with it.
It's kind of more of like a meeting of minds. It's more of an intellectual battle they're having at the moment. They're different ideologies, and as we kind of know from Walkabout, John is in a far better position in terms of what's going on. He's in a stronger position because he knows more about the island's capabilities. Also, we're getting his use of his legs back, so he's got more. He's holding his cards fairly close to his chest, but he's still he's trying to get Jack to quote unquote believe.
Yeah, and he's seen Smokey at this point as well, hasn't he? So so he knows way more.
Yeah, so
and I guess he's got more credit to mention when he's saying to him, was it a hallucination? Does it really matter if it was or it wasn't? Because ultimately, there's a smoke monster on the island. He knows that. So he's got the ammunition there, but whether it's real or not, he's kind of irrelevant on this island. So just kind of go with it. I think.
Well, I think there's like a throwaway line when someone says when they're in the cave and someone says, "Oh, you shot a polar bear the other day." So like what? Anything like that, basically.
That's good. It's funny you should mention. It's funny you mentioned Smokey, because I was wondering, like, because they have the conversation in the episode. Is he delusional? Is he having the hallucination, or is it a ghost? So I went on the Lost Wikipedia, the Lostopedia, and apparently it is canonically the form of Christian Shepherd that Jack sees is actually Smokey. So unfortunately that puts paid to the theory, but obviously at that time we didn't know, we didn't know what the smoke monster was, what Smokey was, but I just had to find out.
Yeah, I think retroactively, or like you say, canonically, every character that sees a dead person, to go a bit Sixth Sense there. Yeah. I think they basically retroactively said, okay, that is the smoke monster in the form of whomever.
Yeah.
Which makes sense.
But I just think it's quite nice.
Lends to it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I just think it's quite nice because obviously at the end of this episode, or quite near the end of the episode, Jack finds the caves, but he also finds the coffin, and it's empty. So, first time watching, you don't know, because at this stage we know that Locke has regained the use of his legs, and you're just like, maybe can this island resurrect dead people? So that's quite a nice mystery if you're watching this for the first time, because we haven't seen Smokey yet. I just thought I'm sort of keeping track of all the ongoing mysteries as well, as if I was watching it for the first time, and I think that's quite a good one when he finds the empty coffin.
Because then he starts smashing it in anger when he opens it up.
Yeah, he destroys that thing. Yeah, absolutely.
He really does.
Don't you think Matthew Fox can just sell anything? I'm just talking about Matthew Fox for a minute. He just, honestly, I watch it. I know I'm a bit further ahead, but that man is incredible. He's such a good actor. I really do think he's underrated, and he's not been in anything recently, but
no,
he's just fantastic. And in this show especially, the one thing I've picked up from a lot of the show is that the Jack episodes are definitely up there in terms of the best quality. And I don't know if that's because, like we've already said, he's kind of the de facto protagonist. You know, you've kind of got to make something interesting of your protagonists. But there are significantly weaker characters in comparison, and I think they just know what they want to do with him. They're just such strong episodes, and I love every time I know it's one of his episodes.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, it's like when you say about Matthew Fox in his career. I mean, he's got everything you'd need to be a leading man in a film. You know, he's got he's got a great talent for conveying different emotions. You know, he's a good-looking guy. He's got tattoos. I don't know what more can you want from a leading man. So, it's just
funnily enough, I had a look the other day to see how many more tattoos he's got, and he's got a full sleeve now.
Oh God,
he's got full-on coloured sleeve on one arm.
He's gone full Ben Affleck.
Like, I don't think he's gone quite full Ben Affleck just yet. But
are those his real tattoos? And that's not just for the show.
No, they're real.
Oh, right. Okay, I thought they were just like a wee bit of color for the show.
No, well, we can mention that now that we've brought it up. But yeah, the writers, from what I can gather, they incorporated them in. There's an episode further on down the line where he gets them in the show.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
But they incorporated it because he had them for real. But obviously, as the series went on, I think he started getting more whilst they were still in production. So they had to like put fake skin over the new tattoos because they were like, okay, I don't think Jack can get tattoos on the island.
That's like, did you ever watch Prison Break?
Oh God, yeah. Funnily enough,
the whole basis of Prison Break was he had the full body, or the upper half of his body covered in tattoos, and then when the tattoos became less of a plot point, your man just always wore long sleeve shirts, like even if it was roasting, the sun beating down. It's like, no, I'm just gonna keep wearing these long sleeve shirts. It's fine.
It's when they got to like yeah, it's like when they got to season 4 and they were like, right, we really don't know what we can do with these tattoos anymore. And we don't really know why we're still doing this show because, you know, how many prison breaks can you pull? It was all right to start with, and then it just got silly. And funnily enough, when I was just having a look on Wikipedia, after Scott gave us the stats, that Kevin Hooks chap, funnily enough, directed a fair bulk of Prison Break.
Oh, wow.
So... yeah, he directed 3 or 4 episodes a season by the looks of it, and 1 episode of The Punisher when it was on Netflix. So he's familiar with network television, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And I do think he does actually quite a good job of conveying everything that's going on, because just to bring it back to Told Foxy, Mr. Fox, he finds the water, doesn't he, in the cave? I've just remembered. So he's found the shelter, but he's also found the coffin. So, John, what other mysteries have we got at the moment then, if you're keeping up with them?
Hang on, I've got to go back a couple of pages here. So we have the monster, we have Smokey, we still have the polar bear, the French woman. Well, I had Kate, but Kate's sorted now. We know she's a fugitive, and potentially, you know, what the island can do, because at this point we don't know that the vision of Jack's dad was Smokey. We just might think that the island can resurrect dead people.
So within 5 episodes, you've got basically 5 fairly major hanging threads there.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing when you think about it. That's ballsy for a first season of a show like this. It's just mad.
Yeah. I mean, it works well to keep you coming back week after week, you know?
Absolutely. So I guess whilst he smashes up the coffin in frustration, there's nothing in there. The side plot, as we've already alluded to, is the water. So obviously Jack does find the water, freshwater spring. Boone's caught out, if I remember rightly. Or does he steal some water?
He does. So I think initially, because Charlie's tried to find the water, he can't find it. Then they go to Jin Do they go to Jin first?
Yeah, they do. Yes.
And he. I'm trying to think. What happens? So I think he's absolved, and then he. Oh, sorry, I remember. Sawyer sold him the water for some magic beans or something. I don't know. So then,
oh, Sawyer.
They go to Sawyer, and he's like got loads of beans in front of him, and he's got a couple of his books there. So Kate confronts him, and he kind of reiterates that he sold them to Jin. From when it goes after that, I don't know how they get to Bone. Maybe someone sees him.
I think I've just remembered. So they get into a bit of a scrap verbally, and I think a bit physically as well. And Boone kind of admits he stole the water because he was trying to take responsibility for rationing it in all his glory, pretty boy glory, bless him. But this is when Jack returns and kind of, again, whether he means to or not, puts himself in the position of leader and gives that little speech, which I absolutely love.
Yeah, he does a John Kimball from
Yes,
Kindergarten
he does.
Cop. He goes, "Shut up."
My personal favorite of that is just when Arnie runs out of the school and just goes, "Nya!" He doesn't say anything other than that. But I think the speech he gives is the, I guess now famous one. If we can't live together, we're going to die alone. I think that becomes a pretty big mantra throughout the rest of the series. So he pulls everything together to put himself in that leadership role and say, we're going to do this in the morning. Half of us are going to go and have a look. We'll get some water. We'll bring it back to the beach. We're going to move inland. And when you think about it, the whole reason he got to where he got to was his dad. So again, there's that wonderful synergy between the flashbacks and what's happening on the island that initially anyway, the writers did so well with doing.
Do you think that I certainly thought that the destruction of the coffin was almost cathartic for Jack.
Yes, definitely.
When he comes back, he's very composed, he's more at peace, and he just straight away takes control and tries to organise things again. Whereas 5 minutes before that, he was a bit of a mess. And for the duration of the episode, he is so.
Yeah, it's a literal and metaphorical thing of saying I'm absolving myself of you, of the person you were, who you represented to me, how you made me feel. You are dead. The coffin's empty. It's literal in the sense that the coffin's empty. So like John says, we've still got the mystery of, has the island resurrected him? But I guess from a personal point of view for Jack, it's literally, okay, it's empty. You are actually gone now. Yeah. There's no more of you. Go away. I've had enough of you.
Yeah.
Very cathartic.
Yeah. No, it's again really effective, and I keep coming back to the score in these episodes, but it just it hits home. The Giacchino score. It's very, very evocative, and I have a note about that in the next episode as well. But yeah, just all comes together in the end, and as you say, just major catharsis for Jack, and I think a real
sorry, go on.
moment. No, sorry, just full circle. A perfect end to this little sort of, I guess, mini arc of the episode.
Yeah, and it doesn't end on a particularly shocking twist or surprise. It's just perfectly. It's like we've said before, where there's that kind of nice-ish ending to each episode, I guess, before something else comes in its place. But I do think, ultimately, this is the underlying message was about Jack's journey to find out who he really is, because he's got this conflicted relationship with his dad, and how is the island going to reinvent him, almost. And it certainly puts him in that position, as if you didn't think he was the main character in the opening episode, he definitely is now.
I think he's definitely more open to embracing that role of leader. Like, because of what John said earlier on the episode, he can't lead until he knows where he's going, but he seemingly knows now where he's trying to get to. And I think a lot of that does rest with the dad thing and the discovery of the coffin. So I think the next sort of 3 or 4 episodes, we'll start to see Jack more as a composed sort of leader Jack, and more sure of himself.
Absolutely. And just whilst I'm thinking about it as well, I think this is one of probably the first episode I can think of really that starts to touch upon symbolism as a fairly effective tool. So obviously the episode's called White Rabbit, quite obvious an allusion to Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, Follow the White Rabbit.
Mm-hmm.
Deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole whilst meeting all these different characters. Obviously Jack follows his dad further and deeper into the jungle. I love little stuff like that. I know it's fairly on the nose, but again, symbolism, fantastic.
Yeah.
You can't beat it. There is a little bit. There's a bit of bit to the end of the flashback where he's arguing with the ticket agent. He's to get Christian's coffin on the flight, and initially she's not letting him do it. And he has that. Actually, again, another little wonderful scene where he's having sort of a breakdown. He's just more frustrated, but he says he needs it to be over.
Yeah.
And again, that's just perfect Jack, isn't it? All over. He says he needs to bury his father. It's probably not because he's upset by it. It's just because he's done with him. He needs it to be over. And that lends into the cathartic nature of destroying the coffin, I think.
Whenever I see like emotional scenes at like an airport desk, I only think of Steve Martin in Planes, Trains and Automobiles. Every time.
Absolutely. Oh, I need to watch that again. I ain't watched that in so long.
But he's great in that scene. And those lines of dialogue from Jack are just absolutely spot on. They just tell you everything you need to know about his feeling about his dad. He just wants it to be over.
Yeah, he's had enough. It's the last straw, and I think it starts with him basically saying, I'm wearing the suit that I'm going to be wearing to my father's funeral.
He just doesn't give a fuck about him. He just wants to
he's like, I've got a hearse waiting for me at LAX when we land from this specific plane to get my father's coffin. So just give me a break.
It's brilliant.
No,
that's the thing.
It's a phenomenal episode.
He hates him that much that he's organised to the letter. In terms of how he's going to off him, bury him. Everything's got to go swimmingly according to plan. It's brilliant. It's great. Just great character development, really.
Yeah,
it really
definitely.
Is.
And like in that we scene in the airport, this has no sort of thematic reasoning behind it, but it's just like I always like seeing people, and it happens throughout the first season. Cameo in other people's flashbacks. You get a split second look at Jin waiting behind him in the queue. It's always one of those things.
Oh, yeah.
Like that meme that's been going around of Rick Dalton pointing. That was me. It was like, oh, there's Jin. There's Jin.
There's so many Rick Dalton moments in this series. It's ridiculous. Just pointing out everything. I think as well, we'll go on to it, obviously, because it's the next episode, but I think you get the same scene, but from Jin's point of view next. So you hear Jack very briefly in the background of that scene as the next episode comes into play, which we will now move on to. So, House of the Rising Sun, episode 6. What are the stats for this one, Scott?
Okay, so it aired a week after the last one, obviously, 27th of October, 2004. The viewership was slight growth from the previous one, 16.83 million viewers. So, 10,000 up from the previous. 1,000 up from the previous week. If my maths is correct. Anyway, one up. Directed by Michael Zimberg. Oh, hang on, birthdays. Right, famous birthdays. British comedy legend and all-round nice fella John Cleese. Oscar-winning Italian actor Roberto Benigni, who directed, I think it was, what's that film called he did?
Is that Life is Beautiful?
Life is Beautiful, yeah. Which he won an Oscar for that, Best Actor. And Kelly Osbourne.
Oh, there we go.
Okay.
So yeah, so there's your star-studded birthday
line. I love that. It was like, and Kelly Osbourne.
Yeah. The director of this was Michael Zimberg. He's well into his 70s now. He's had quite a varied career over television. So he's directed shows such as Monk, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Taxi, Jag, if you remember Jag from the 90s, The Blacklist, and also, which I discovered to my horror, the US version of Men Behaving Badly.
No way.
Yeah, that happened. I think it
There
lasted.
was a US version?
Yeah, it lasted for 2 seasons as well.
What?
And it starred your boy Rob Schneider.
Oh, God.
Imagine that.
It gets worse. Oh, my God. Well, that's one I'm going to research later.
Yeah, I'll think about going down the YouTube hole for that. Written by this one's quite funny actually. Directed by a guy called Javier Graham Marshall, who is he was a writer for The Middleman, which was a comic series which is still going. He initially wrote The Middleman with the intention to be picked up for television. They decided to publish it as a comic, which was then picked up by ABC as television show later on in 2008, and then it was cancelled the same year. So it's kind of all gone full circle with that one.
Oh man, that's awful.
Yeah, so but
that's horrible.
But he's doing quite a lot of. I didn't note down, but he is still quite a prolific writer, and he's still quite well regarded among Lost fans. I mean, this episode particularly is quite significant because it won an award along with the pilot episode and the next episode, which is The Moth, I think it's called, or Moth.
The Moth, yeah.
Yeah, for the depiction of Charlie's drug addiction. It won a Prism Award, which I think it kind of focuses on drug portrayal, addiction portrayal, and mental health as well in television shows. So those 3 episodes won this award. So it's quite a significant one in terms of Charlie as well as Jin and Sun.
So jumping into the episode then, House of the Rising Sun. So when I was younger, I guess, like, I don't know why, but I wasn't obviously, like, I wasn't into me subtitled films back then and everything. And this is an episode that is obviously very subtitle heavy. It's very, it's just very different to what I, at the time, knew about film and TV. And also, I always felt a bit of a disconnect for Sun and Jin at the time. But I now realise that is exactly the point. So the majority of the episodes in Korean, and the more I've watched it, the older I've got, the more I think it's probably one of my favourite episodes of the season, if I'm honest.
Yeah, for me as well.
It's really, really good. Like, as a couple, I think Jin and Sun are just really, really interesting, and like even right from this episode, I think even before the pre-credits, like in the cold open, it subverts the relationship. From what we've thought of thus far, Jin's very overprotective of Sun. He's kind of like, and I hope I'm not out of line for saying this, but it's like the stereotypical overbearing. It's like, it seems to be like an Asian character stereotype that he's like an overbearing husband or an overbearing father.
I know what you mean.
Would I be okay in saying that, do you think? And the episode with the flashback almost immediately subverts it in that she's the rich socialite type person, and he was a waiter for her father or something like that. I just thought it was quite nice because everything thus far, you're led to believe it sort of the other way, the power dynamic, and this one
Absolutely,
just right off the bat, like, it's the other way around.
Absolutely, because the flashbacks start with Sun at a party, and she's getting served champagne by Jin, isn't she? He's the waiter, and then from there, I mean, there's obviously other points, like we said with Jack's episode. In the flashbacks, there's always more to come, but then obviously they develop the relationship, and that's when Sun wants to run away to America. But Jin's insisting that, he does the honourable thing, which I guess is another, not a stereotype, it's a very respectful thing in Asian culture, to tell the father that they are seeing one another, to ask for the hand in marriage and things and such forth. But yeah, there was so much in this that for me, just... I don't know what I was missing initially. I don't know. I never, as soon as it was one of the, especially in the early days when it was very subtitle heavy, and I just didn't feel like a lot was happening. And now I watched it back and I was gripped. I don't know. I saw it in a whole new light. I really don't know why. Yeah. It was just phenomenally written.
Yeah, excellent episode. And like, I think the language barrier, I mean, the majority of the cast are all speaking English, obviously, but it's such a logical choice. Obviously, if it's an international flight, there are going to be lots of nationalities and different people from different countries.
Absolutely.
It makes perfect sense. And I don't know if, like, as you say, 2004, I don't know if there were huge amounts of shows taking the risk of having an episode that was not entirely subtitled, but the majority of it as being in Korean. It's just it just makes perfect sense, rather than having
I
them
agree.
speak English right away.
Absolutely. I think to my knowledge, this, especially in, I guess, modern TV culture, I cannot think of a more international cast than Lost, really.
Yeah.
And especially as the series progresses, because as we've discussed, you get AAA and you get even Ana Lucia, people like that. It's a very diverse show. So yeah, I mean, even up until, just from a bit of a divergence from my point of view, but something like Inglourious Bastards in film world, that entire 30-minute opening's all in French for the most part. And even that, initially, when I was still trying to appreciate that side of things, put me off at first, and then I just realized it's the best bit of the film. It's just such a masterclass of tension and character development, and it's the same here. But just driving through the flashbacks, you get that nice opening where they develop this relationship, and then I think the second flashback is sometime after they've been married, Jin returns home covered in the blood.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you think, oh shit, that's a bit of a difference. And this is where that power dynamic that you mentioned, John, starts to come into play, I think.
He just sort of becomes the cold person that we've seen in the first 5 episodes. Yeah, I just think character development wise, it's just really, really interesting. And like, going forward, again, not to spoil too much, I think that, like, the language barrier, like, eventually Jin, spoilers, learns English, and by, I think it's the 4th or 5th season, he's just speaking in English, which he's speaking in English because, like, for Sun, I would imagine, just so they can communicate with the other survivors better. And I think it's really clever to drive the story in this episode, because, as I say, of course you'd have different languages on the plane, but it fuels the tension, because you don't know why Jin has attacked Michael, or, well, obviously the rest of the survivors, because they are all speaking English, they have no clue why he did it, and he has no way to communicate to them why he did it. It's just a great way of really upping the tension. And there's a point where, is it Saeed is going to, like, question him?
Yeah.
I'm just like, oh, why? I just wish you could all talk to each other, because I'm sure there's a perfectly valid reason.
Yeah,
but yeah,
absolutely.
just for creating drama, I think it's a really good device.
Yeah, let's talk about that then, because so on the island, Sun attacks. Sun doesn't attack Jin. Jin attacks Michael on the beach for no apparent reason, and I believe it's Sawyer and Saeed subdue everyone, and then they end up handcuffing Jin to the wreckage, which I always, just going a bit further forward, always find funny, because even at the point I'm at now, he's still got that handcuff on.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Oh, yeah, of course.
It's continuity for you.
Yeah,
that is continuity for you.
Did you know
so even in, like, mid-season 2, I think he's still on his left hand.
Wow. Whenever Saeed and Sawyer come to break up the fight, Saeed, or rather Saeed's stuntman, absolutely cleans Jin. He just he knocks him about 10 feet. I had to rewind it 3 or 4 times because it was hilarious.
I must admit, like, the early fights in this show are hilarious, because they really, really put the punching effect on. Like, it's so loud on some of them, and like you say, properly cleans him out. I always think the same when, like, Sawyer and Saeed first had their fight in the pilot episodes, and you just think there was a lot of thwacking going on. It was like straight out of Batman, 60s Batman. But just furthering that along, so they handcuff Jin to the wreckage, and Michael, I believe, thinks it's racially motivated at the time, and then he ends up telling Walt that that's not the case. And then I guess we get the next big twist of the series where Sun finds Michael and speaks to him in English. I need to talk to you.
Yes, about the watch, wasn't it? Was it? Yeah, it was a watch, isn't it?
Yes, it's the watch.
Sun's dad's watch that he bequeathed to Jin, or he gave it to him as a gift. I don't know.
I think that's where the honor of that culture comes into play. Definitely.
Yeah.
Even on the island, he's still protecting his father-in-law, but also basically his boss's property.
His Casio.
His Casio. Yeah. Yeah, I must have this digital watch. But yeah, I mean, so I remember at the time, and still am it's still quite shocking. Something as trivial as being able to speak English can be played into being such a massive twist, and it's still really well executed. Watching it back all these years later,
I think it. Besides in terms of developing the story, I think it really legitimizes Jin and Sun as characters, as Korean characters, because even if they're we discuss, we can't think of a show which is this international, but if there was, they would probably have them English speaking straight away, and
absolutely,
and not try to be as authentic as possible. So the fact that they did have them speaking Korean for the duration of the episode, where they're in their flashbacks and when they're together, it just makes it feel more as real as it can be in the situation, which is very, very good. And
yeah, absolutely. And then you get the further twist that not only can Sun speak English, but Jin's unaware of this.
Yes.
Which again adds further tension into the mix.
And I'm sure that will come spilling out at some point. I can't recall when, but I'm sure it'll end up in some kind of heated debate.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can confirm. It's a heated one, as it often is in this first season.
But we don't actually learn about why Jin has blood on him. I mean, he could have just been making jam or something. I don't know. But...
It could have been, yeah. In a freak jam accident, he got jam all over his white shirt.
Here, now put on this Armani suit. Now we've got a big order at the jam factory going out tomorrow. We need to go and supervise because they're slacking, so we need to order out by 12 p.m. Jin. Okay, I'm on it. Big accident at the jam factory, just everywhere.
But whilst we are talking about the blood on the shirt, you do obviously, like you say, it doesn't get resolved as yet. It's a bit further down the line in the season, but you straight away you think, okay, he's in too deep in something here. He's involved in something that's not legal or not nice at the very least.
I guess there's a flashback scene where Sun's father goes, "Come into my office, Jin, and I want you to do this for me." I guess
yes,
yeah. I bet it's. And he's like, I'm just a simple waiter. I don't. And he's like, right.
This one's not for me.
This one's not for me. Yeah. He's like, well, if you don't, then you can't marry my daughter. I bet I'm exactly correct.
More, yeah. From what I can remember of where I'm up to at the moment, yeah. He basically tells him he needs to do something for him to prove his honor, and it's malicious.
Yeah.
But that's another example of them chopping up the flashbacks and then fitting them in piece by piece as they go along, which also, just whilst we're talking about it, makes me definitely think in these early days that they definitely had a big story bible of each character, because you can't just on the fly write flashbacks like that and then fill bits in as you go along. You've got to have it and then chop it up as and when you please.
Definitely, yeah. Otherwise it would have been incoherent and would have made much sense in those earlier seasons. So
absolutely,
yeah.
But, okay. Part of me was wondering. Sorry.
Go on, John.
I was just wondering what episode, because the past two episodes, the White Rabbit one and this one, have both had flashbacks to, say, the very beginning of whatever the character's journey was, right up until they get on the plane, pretty much. Because this one ends with Jin and Sun in the airport queue. I was just wondering if, like, the writers were trying to, tell the flashback story from start to finish, in case they didn't get to tell any more of the story. That's why I don't know. I don't know when the rest of the series was picked up. When they knew they were getting a second series or a third series. But I just thought it was quite interesting that they wanted to tell, maybe they wanted to tell the whole flashback story in that one character's spotlight episode, just in case they didn't get to tell the full story later down the line, and then they had to fill in the flashback.
Yeah, no, that's a good point actually, because I read on Wikipedia for the episode that the show was picked up for the full season after this one aired.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess they had already probably made the decision before, but it happened after this episode was aired.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think in terms of a second season, it was building up towards the finale. That it's maybe something to have a look for next week. But I think it was definitely towards the end, because the ratings got ridiculous towards the finale ending. That it would have been picked up for a second season for sure.
Even with if this episode had only been the only Jin and Sun episode that we got, I think it's again repeating myself, but it's really effective because we only had maybe 5 or 6 flashbacks within the whole episode. But that last one, where Sun is contemplating, leaving to get in the car, and again, I'm going to talk about the score, but everything combines in that scene to make that really emotional. And you've only known these characters' backstory for maybe 10 minutes in total over the 6 flashbacks. And when he looks back at her and he shows her the flower, which she mentioned previously in the episode, it's just oh yeah, no, get on the plane. I know it's going to crash, but get on the plane with your husband.
Yeah, it's perfect writing, and it shows that there are 2 sides to Jin, and I think the one that wins overall is his love for Sun. It's just he's a very conflicted gentleman, unfortunately. But yeah, I totally agree. He plays it as he's such a dick to her sometimes, and he doesn't answer her when she's asking him about what's the blood on the shirt. She lets that slide. She knows that her father's a powerful man, but she doesn't talk about that, and he doesn't either. So she knows there's stuff going on. She has every right to, and we're getting into a bit of a Desperate Housewives conversation here. She has every right to leave him if she wants to, but
there's another thing going on. Sorry, but there's another thing going on. We're going about the subject of daddy issues. Of course, Sun falls into that. But why are all the dads super rich and super successful? You've got Sun's dad, Christian Shepherd, Charles Widmore. Everyone's dad has got a really prominent role or successful job in some degree, or really successful.
Yeah. Forgot about Charlie Widmore.
Yeah, old Adam Dow. Yeah.
He's always the bad guy.
He's in everything, isn't he?
He's in. Honestly, we've just been watching Captain America again, and he's a bloody 5-minute villain on a screen with Robert Redford, and I literally said to Emma, "He's here again. He's there." We just did a rewatch of the OC last year, and he's in that and all.
Yeah, I think that was one of his first American roles after he left Neighbours, the OC.
Yeah, he was Caleb Nichols.
Yeah, but he was for the mid 2000s. He was in everything. He was absolutely everything.
And he was never the good guy. He was always the bad guy.
No. He was the Mark. Can't remember his name. Who's the guy that's in Tinker Tailor with Gary Oldman?
Mark Strong.
Yeah, basically that Mark Alan Dale was the Mark Strong at that era. Just a bag on everything.
Of early noughties television. Yeah. I can't wait for him to come into the series. I love talking about Alan Dale. He's great. He's fantastic. One thing that I took a note of, and it's a bit of a sidebar, I guess, from Sun and Jin themselves, is the little bits that are the subplots, should I say. So we're going into the caves for the first time with Jack, Kate, Charlie, and I think Locke as well to investigate it. And there's a little fun bit with Charlie stepping on a beehive. I don't know if anyone else really liked that scene, but I enjoyed that.
Yeah, brilliant bit of comedy and tension.
Absolutely. It felt like Don Monaghan was very much doing his Hobbit shtick over again. You kind of imagine Merry and Pippin are in a field and they're like, "Oh no, you've trod on a beehive, don't move. Mr. Frodo, come and help me." Do you know what I mean? I always know, you always know in those scenes when anyone says, "Oh yeah, we'll get something to weigh it up," it's always going to break. You know, we need to transfer the human's weight to something else. It's always going to break. So there was that little bit, and then also this is the first introduction, and it's not resolved for much later. But the Adam and Eve skeletons in the caves.
Oh yes, which are Bosch and Alison Janney.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
I completely forgot about those skeletons.
Isn't it? I can't remember. It's later, obviously, in the show, but we are jumping quite far ahead. But that episode where they're Alison Janney's like guest starring in, it's like one of the most polarizing episodes of Lost ever because it's just completely different to any other episode they've done. It's purely focused on Jacob and Blackie.
Yeah, it's pretty bad from memory. I can't really remember much of it, if I'm perfectly honest. It does, from memory, it does dip into massive religious allegories and different time settings, which, even though we do get used to that in this, it's one of those that I'd imagined the Lindelof. I think Lindelof wrote it, and you can imagine him getting high and writing it and thinking, "Yeah, that'll do."
Have a smoke on Mary's pipe weed.
Yeah. I'm sure the audience want to know this information. It's maybe one of those episodes where they told too much. You don't really want to know certain origins of certain characters, but we'll get to that as we get to it.
So Jack finds stones on their bodies. That's right, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
The black and white. One black, one white. Which I guess, looking back, did they intend for that? I don't know. If they did, it's a tiny bit of genius, I guess. But I quite like that he estimates that they've been dead for like 40, 50 years, and you think they're clearly much older than that. He's like, judging by the decomposition of their outfits or whatever, 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Adam and Eve, which obviously it has to be Locke who dubs them Adam and Eve, just to fit in with the spirituality of the island and that character.
Yeah, no one even like challenges it. It's like, oh, shut your bloody Bible bashing weirdo.
You're like, oh, he's back.
Here he is, fucking weirdo.
Here he is. Locke's back. And also, there's a nice little moment I've got in my notes here with Locke and Charlie when they're clearing the wreckage at the caves, and Locke actually recognizes Charlie from Drive Shaft. Which I thought was really kind of a stroke of genius, because aside from adding a bit of another layer to Locke, it's just nice that Charlie gets his ego tickled a little bit, I guess.
Isn't like their second album called Oil Change or something really on the nose? I didn't like Oil Change as much.
It's that sophomore effort that didn't do well, basically.
But there's definitely moments in this, because this obviously helped them to win the award for Charlie's the portrayal of Charlie's addiction. So there's moments between John and Charlie where I think John he acknowledges that Charlie's got a problem. He might not actually explicitly state that he knows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then he also mentioned about his guitar, and he's like, he has faith that he'll find his guitar. But I'm not sure if he actually catches him taking his Charlie.
No, I think he does, because he has a whole speech about if you want something from this island, you have to give it something, and I think he talks about withdrawal as well. I think.
No, he does. It's at the end. It's at the end, and yeah, that's it. He says at the end, he knows that he either tells him or he implies he knows he's addicted to heroin, and he says, if you give up your drugs, the island will give you your guitar.
Yeah.
It's like, and that's when he shows him where the guitar is.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. There was like a manipulation sort of factor in there as well with John, almost.
Yes, and that again, that's him. Like we've already said, that's him using his psychological spirituality, I guess. But he knows more about this island than everyone else.
Yeah. It's almost like a preacher who's who's kind of at a congregation. He's proclaiming that he's spoken to God, or he's had the word of God, and now he's deciphering it, and he's presenting it to the people, to the masses. So John is kind of doing something very not similar to that, but something in the similar vein to that, where he's slowly kind of just drip feeding little pockets of good words to people to try and get them on side and get them believing.
Yeah. Was it this episode or maybe the previous one? I can't remember, where he's speaking to somebody and he says he looked into the eye of the island and what he saw was beautiful. It was like in one of the past episodes. I don't know if we've talked about it, but
I think it was this one with Jack. Last one with Jack.
Previous one, right? Okay, yeah. He's bought into it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, hook, line, sinker. Yeah.
Which is fair enough.
Yeah, it works. What I also love about this episode is that there's this little side plot involving Kate and Jack and Sawyer. It's only briefly hinted on, but there's this divide which obviously takes place where they're discussing about whether they're going to move to the cave, and there's lots of good points on both sides of the argument. And at the end of the episode, it kind of focuses on Kate on the last shot, because Kate is clearly torn between Jack and Sawyer in both ways. You know, obviously she feels his attraction to Sawyer and to Jack as well, but they're opposing ideologies. She kind of sees both sides, and because she's clearly torn because, you know, with the themes of duality, she has two sides to her. She obviously has this vulnerability to her, which Jack speaks to, and then she has this rebellious, quote unquote, criminal side or rebellious side that Sawyer is more. She speaks to Sawyer with on a stronger level. So I did like that kind of little seed was sown there for the love triangle. So in some degree, anyway.
Yeah, and Sawyer has better
definitely.
hair.
Yes,
Well,
without a doubt.
Yeah, better hair.
I love Sawyer,
And he reads books as well.
Yeah, he's a well-read bastard, isn't he? At the end of the day, and just moving on with that. So Jin's still locked up against the wreckage, and this is after Michael's spoken with Sun. He approaches Jin with an axe, and he chops off his handcuffs, which obviously, as we've already joked about, he maintains up until at least mid-season 2. For continuity purposes. He throws the watch at him, and this is the note I took from it as well. He says that the fight over the watch was stupid because time doesn't matter on a damn island. Now, again, I don't know if the time travel thing was already thought about at this point, but it's just little things that you notice in it as you rewatch these things, and you think, "Oh my god, were they being literal, or is it just a matter of phrasing?" I don't know.
Well, it's all to find out, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just funny. When I looked at it, I was like, I remember writing it down and going, "You sons of bitches! Like, don't tell me that is a thing." I hope it. I don't know.
It's weird to just think.
I picked up.
It's weird to think that any of this, what we start, with John, when listed off those plot threads, which are still kind of built to tie up these mysteries. It's weird to think that all of it, everything in the show in these seasons, in the early seasons, are deliberate, and I think it's true. Everything was deliberate to some degree. Whether they figured out the ending, there was plot threads starting that they wanted to explain later on. So every single shot, every single discovery, like the bodies, Jin and Sun's watch, everything was deliberate. I'm pretty certain of that.
I'd agree. What I was going to say was just a few things based around the production, because obviously that kind of brings the episode to an end. Michael saying to Jin, stay away from me and my boy, which obviously becomes basically all Michael says. And then Charlie is playing his guitar as people kind of return from the beach to the cave. And as we've already said, Kate's involved in that as well. So there's lots of things happening already. 6 episodes in, we've like we've already said, it could have been like an exposition dump, really. This whole scenario, and yet it's all very logically thought out, and we're all invested at this point. Even now on a rewatch, like my fourth or fifth rewatch of this show over the years, still just as invested, if not more. But some of the things that I've found interesting when I did a bit of research about it. So, House of the Rising Sun is a reference to the song of the same name by the English rock group The Animals from 1964.
Quality
little
song.
bit of trivia.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great song. I thought it was a nice little reference. But funnily enough, as we've been discussing, the Yunjin Kim and Daniel Day Kim, who play Sun and Jin, were both worried about the depiction of the Korean relationship as being potentially outdated. And I think they had extensive talks with J.J. Abrams and Lindelof about developing the characters to try and find a way to make it not so outdated, because like we've already said, there were those at this time, there would have been those stereotypes in place. The Korean character on another show would probably be speaking English straight away, and I thought that was quite a nice thing that they actually worked together to try and think, okay, so how can we push this further? How can we actually make this real? And for all intents and purposes, I think they did amazing.
Yeah, I think it's. I'm not sure about the history of the characters and the genesis of the characters in the initial stages, but you do get a lot. You read a lot of things on either IMDb trivia or Wikipedia. Roles were written with actors in mind, so it might be a case very similar to where Yeonjin Kim and Daniel Day Kim obviously had ideas because they were a bit apprehensive about how they were written initially. So then they went to Abrams and Lindelof and said, look, we've got these ideas. And then they're like, okay, yeah, that works. That makes a lot more logical sense. And you guys obviously have a bit more knowledge about it because it's your culture, it's your country. So maybe they kind of did that with, before they started filming.
I think both actors they're both Korean American, but they were born in Korea and raised in the US. But they've got that cultural reference, and I think the writer of the episode, who we've already mentioned, Javier Grillo. How do you pronounce his surname?
I think it's Mark Swatch.
Mark Swatch.
Yeah.
I've got another note here saying, obviously he doesn't speak Korean, and he struggled to write the episode initially because he couldn't get into that cultural headspace, for which he got no personal reference himself. So, how could he possibly write an episode like this? So I think by having Dae Kim and Yunjin Kim almost kind of helping shape the episode, it was really to the show's advantage in a way.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I think as well, you've got that wonderful perspective as well. I know from an audience point of view, it's fantastic to watch, but Jin really is in the worst case scenario. He's with all these strangers. He doesn't speak any English. And given what little we know of him already in the flashbacks, he's already suspicious of people in general. So it's just perfect drama fodder.
I was going to say, we haven't, because I remember vividly, I hated Michael as a character. I thought he was just one of the most utterly just abhorrent characters. And I think that's just the way he's written. He was written to be a point of conflict.
Rubbish.
Yeah. But
I agree with you, though.
But I've not seen it, and I've just remembered, I know it's a long time ago, and I watched it 14 years ago, whatever you want to say, or 10 years ago now. But I remember vividly, quite early on, just disliking Michael because he was always causing shit. But that's not really happened yet. It's kind of just little moments between him and Walton. That's all we've had so far. Aside from a couple of the altercations with Jin and Sun. But I'm pretty sure that's obviously Walt becomes a big character towards later episodes. But I don't know when does that come into play? When does Michael take more prominence? Is that midway through?
I'd say midway through, because he gets to a point. I mean, he gets his flashback episode where you get a bit of detail, obviously, about his life prior, and there's a lot of grief and angst in all of that. very naturally written episode. If I'm honest, it's just maybe how it's played that to be honest with you, he doesn't come across as frustrating as he was initially. I will say that. But I'd say mid-season, when he decides to build the raft, really comes more into play.
Oh yeah, God, I remember this. I'm remembering it all now.
Yeah, he decides one day, I'm getting my boy off the island. We're going to build a raft, and everyone looks at him like, huh? And then you get the whole politics about who's going to go on the raft with him, and so on and so forth.
Oh God, yeah.
So there's all that to come. The thing I'd like to leave off with is a bit of a nice thing, and it's another bit to do with the production of the episode. But the bee storyline, i.e., the one with the other characters actually stepping on the bees, was filmed with some real bees, from what I can gather.
Like digital bees, or I don't know.
The majority of them are digital, and the fear of bees that Charlie has is based on the writer's real life experience. But apparently they covered Dominic Monaghan in sticky honey to encourage the bees to land on him and stay there, which I thought was really funny. And they were male drones, which meant they didn't have any stingers, and you could handle them easily, which would make bees a lot nicer. Well, they're nice anyway. I think you just don't piss them off, do you? But
don't step on the
so
hive.
I just don't step on the hive, yeah, and don't get involved with hornets either, because they're just bastards. Yeah, the majority is CGI, but yeah, don't don't get involved with them. Anyway,
I'll be the next
and
podcast.
On that,
lost in the age of murder hornet.
I'm there for that one. We'll probably have plenty of time. Let's face it. So
that's true. Sorry, just before you finished, there was these past two episodes. For one reason, really annoyed me. These past two episodes, because I'd written down like a new thing that I could do in the podcast, and it was, what is Shannon's bullshit this week, which is not in either of these episodes. It's really annoying.
Oh shit!
God,
no,
yeah.
It's not. She has a conversation with Sawyer about something.
Is she doing this week? And she's barely in them both, so I was really annoyed. I was hoping to vent some spleen there, but she's not in them. So,
well, I was very happy recently when I got to season 2, and you know why, but it's fine. Yeah, to be honest, she's another one, a bit like Michael. Like rewatching it back, she's annoying. Don't get me wrong, but she's not as bad as I remembered her. Maybe I just had a lot of disgust for her when I was younger. I don't know. It's very strange.
I think we're more desensitized to that type of character now, because pretty much everyone who's on Instagram is exactly like her.
Oh, God, Shannon is like predates Instagram, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's just a typical.
I guess so does Boone to an effect as well.
Yeah, I think I think we're just used to seeing that kind of person now, so just kind of go over our heads quite easily.
Yeah, that's fair.
But next episode, definitely punch that in for that one. Watch Shannon's bullshit today or this episode.
Tell you what, for this whole first season, for anyone who is actually listening to this, we'll have for the first season, we'll have a Shannon meter. We'll try and figure out what's Shannon doing this week, and what's Boone doing or not doing, and yeah, we'll see what we can dig up.
Or we could do a Michael.
A Michael one as well.
Michael shouting walk to count.
Oh God! All you need is the raft episode, and that's your quota. Let me tell you that much. I had to mute it at one point; it was doing my head in. But next week will be episode 7, The Moth, which is, I believe, a Charlie episode.
Yeah.
And episode 8, Confidence Man, which is Mr. Sawyer.
Ooh.
So we'll have a lot to dig into next week, because that is a good week. So, thank you guys. Yep, thank you guys. Stay safe as always.
And you.
And for anyone listening, thank you very much. And speak soon.